are no ceilings. The sky's the limit.
Hillary Clinton accepts her party's nomination at the Democratic Convention, which opened with dissension and ended in what looked like unity.
Just remember this, Trump is going to be no more Mr. Nice Guy.
Ruh-roh, buckle your seatbelts. The campaign road to November promises to be a bumpy one.
The Department of Health is aggressively testing people in the affected area.
Miami now ground zero for Zika. 4 cases found in one Miami neighborhood. Local and state authorities are acting. When will Congress?
Good morning. Welcome. Great to be with you. 2 weeks, 2 cities, 2 conventions give way to one presidential election that has already made history. No doubt there is more to come.
No doubt. And the speeches we heard at the Democratic Convention contrasted so sharply with the ones that we heard from the Republicans. In Cleveland, the GOP was downbeat, the Democrats relentlessly upbeat. It may not be morning in America, they said, but America is still great, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The 2 parties have starkly different plans for the future, starkly different candidates. Hillary Clinton is a centrist Democrat with nearly 40 years of government experience. Donald Trump has never held public office, although he has been a public figure for many years. In the past year, he seized control of the Republican Party and is now pushing it in an entirely different direction. And we begin this morning with guests who had a front row seat this week as they witnessed history being made in Philadelphia.
Some introductions. Congressman Alcee Hastings is one of the Democrats' superdelegates. He has served in Congress since 1993 and represents Florida District 20, which is North Broward to Central Palm Beach County. Yep. Yolanda Cash Jackson is a delegate just back from Philadelphia. She is an attorney at Becker and Polyakov, specializing in government law, and she served as general counsel to the local chapter of the NAACP. And Marco Hiron, who has the distinction of being Miami-Dade's only Hispanic male delegate who is elected at the district level. He's also the former communications chair for the Miami-Dade Democratic Party. And welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone get some sleep a little bit? A little bit.
We try.
A little bit. Congressman, if I can begin, the whole point of a nominating convention is to celebrate the nominee, bring the party together. This convention began with huge dissension by the Bernie Sanders supporters. Did they end with kind of a unified support for Hillary Clinton?
Without question. The president delivered the best speech that he has ever made, which is saying something. In addition, the president's speech, I think, will be one of the classics at a Democratic convention.
Yeah. Just the way that Mario Cuomo's 1984 speech, which his son cited, that was a classic. You think this one?
One of the ones I go back to is Governor Clement when he said, "How long, America, how long?"
Lord, how long?
But the First Lady, Michelle Obama, was just plain magnificent without any question. And I thought that by the end, the unity was palpable in the room. And by the time Secretary Clinton spoke, which in my judgment she did what was required, she hit all of the bases. It's been described as workmanlike, but that's Hillary's style. And so I felt that they did everything that was necessary. Mike, before I go further, in another segment, you're going to talk about Zika. I'll answer the question for you. I'm terribly disappointed that Congress did not take action before we left. And it was because the Republicans in the House added to a $1.2 billion measure that allowed things such as Planned Parenthood to be addressed and the Affordable Health Care Act. It is wrong. Zika has been being tracked for 11 years. Since 2011. And this disease and another mosquito are here to stay. The Center for Disease Control and the National Institute of Health have both said in order to do a vaccine, even with private participation, it's going to take nearly 2 years. These people are crazy. I do say the Florida delegation has stood up, and that's Republicans and Democrats, and tried to get the money here. I'm sorry to go that way.
We're going to talk all about that, and we're going to hear from the governor as well. Yolanda, you know, what I was really very surprised about is there's so much focus on Clinton, Trump. There was a faction at the DNC of Bernie Sanders supporters, even after Bernie Sanders invited everyone to be unified and join, who sort of went rogue. Bernie or bust movement. does not include Bernie Sanders. What does that do to the party unification?
Well, I am certainly not a spokesperson for the party, but I can tell you that the unity did exist there outside of that. And so by the end of the convention, I think that you heard that settle down very much. So I think one of the very important things was the emergence of the black woman in the convention, with the person leading the convention, the roll call, certainly the organizer of the convention, all which really leads to getting back to the base of the party. The women of the movement, the mothers of the movement, all very, very telling. And it started with the First Lady.
And Yolanda, in 2012, black turnout was 66%. Hillary Clinton needs at least 62% of African-American voters if she's going to win. Can she do that? I mean, she will need President Obama to go out and campaign with her, won't she?
Well, I think President Obama certainly, but I think Michelle Obama
there you go.
a lot of lines. I think that women resonated. Her message resonated with women when she talked about the slaves waking up every morning in a house filled with slaves, and her girls. I mean, that is a professional woman's nightmare, not to be a good influence on their girls.
Amen to that.
And I think that message goes far.
Jump in, Marco.
If I may, on your question, I think day one, there was a lot of tension in the room. I remember sitting where there was some Bernie supporters behind me. There was a lot of tension. By day 2, 3, 4, everyone in the arena was really on the same page.
Well, I will tell you, during the acceptance speech, and I don't want to interrupt you, but there was a faction of Bernie Sanders supporters, even during Secretary Clinton's acceptance speech, who was booing up in the rafters, who there were people around them trying to overcome that booing, but that showed that even at the end, there are people, I know you don't want to represent all young people, but on this table you are.
Yes, yes.
That's a tough demographic for her to bring in. Okay?
And we understand that, and we know that they're passionate. We know that the Bernie Sanders supporters have been very passionate, and we have to give them their time. We have to give them their moment to grieve the fact that their nominee is not the candidate. However, I think that it was interesting and funny to hear actress or comedian Silverman when she says, "Those Bernie or bust folks." This is ridiculous.
Right. That was one of the highlights of the early parts of the convention, and that was ad-libbed, and it was good. Elsie, the platform made all kinds of concessions to Bernie Sanders.
75% of what he wanted.
And also giving him that primetime speech, making him the last speaker of the night. Was it on Monday or Tuesday night? I think that the Democratic Party leaders quietly said, we are going to acknowledge the power of the millions of people who voted for Bernie Sanders.
There's no question. And Secretary Clinton, if you recall, said, we hear you, and we need you.
Your cause is our cause.
Your cause is our cause. He and his functionaries and supporters received 75% of what they wanted by his estimation at the platform. But Michael, you have to remember, you and Glenna, that in the Obama-Clinton election, there were young people, especially millennials, that were unhappy, and 82% of them came around by the time of the election. I don't mean to be disparaging of Bernie. I worked with Bernie, but Bernie is not the first revolutionary in the Democratic Party. Jesse Jackson advocated everything that he advocated, from universal health care all the way to pre-K and infrastructure. And there are others along the way. Dennis Kucinich certainly has done those things. So we see it come together. But what needs to be remembered is this. Many of those supporters, even those in and outside the convention that were Bernie or bust people, number one, some of them aren't registered. Number two, many of them are not Democrats. And I might add, that includes Bernie. How in the world, to show how inclusive Democrats are,
Democratic socialist.
How could a Democratic socialist independent be in my party dictating terms to me? If I was controlling it, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, but Congressman, he hit a nerve. He resonated.
No question.
I mean, people responded. In some ways, the same disaffected people, don't you think, Yolanda, who responded to Donald Trump, people who hadn't ever voted or hadn't voted very often. I mean, you have a lot of discontent in this country and in the state of Florida.
Listen, the discontent is what will bring this party together. What I noticed from the convention was that there was room in the tent. And I watched both conventions. That was not the same. The GOP convention was political. The Democratic convention was personal. And
the Republican convention, if I may interrupt, was also, I mean, Glenna and I were there, we listened to every word, was dystopian, it was dark, it was America is in trouble.
Yes.
And Donald Trump, I alone can fix it.
Oh boy.
well, that didn't go out over too well.
You know, let's take a quick break because there were some criticisms from the Republicans about the Democratic convention that it was not attentive enough to national security. So think about that. We're going to come right back and talk about that. Stay with us.
Back, our focus this morning is on the Republican National Convention, mainly, and our guests are Congressman Alcee Hastings, Yolanda Cass-Jackson, attorney Becker Poliakoff, and Marco Giron.
And the Democrats, too.
And the Democrats. Yes, thank you. Marco, the Republicans, the party sent out, Trump campaign, sent out some pretty angry, but in a way accurate notices the first 2 days and said, nobody's talked about national security, nobody's talked about ISIS, and indeed, for the first 2 nights, nobody really did.
I do believe, I'm not sure exactly what night it was, but there was discussion on foreign policy, and there was a discussion. I don't remember the name of the admiral who spoke, but let's talk about what Mr. Trump has said about the fallen soldier, how he hasn't addressed the fact that this individual gave his life. And that he is American.
Captain Khan, the Muslim American
Yes.
whose parents live in Charlottesville, Virginia. Sure, let's talk about that.
I mean, here is a person who is American, who, for all sense of the word, has given his life for this country. And here is the opposition, or the Republican side, basically not acknowledging this person's death.
I'll tell you what, let's play a part of that speech. Khazar Khan, the father whose speech was prior to Chelsea Clinton, Mrs. Clinton. A lot of people weren't even paying attention until he started to speak, and then, wow.
I mean, then it was electrifying in the hall.
Take a listen to it.
Let's take a listen.
Donald Trump, you're asking Americans to trust you with their future. Let me ask you, have you even read the United States Constitution? I will gladly lend you my copy. In this document, look for the words liberty and equal protection of law.
Wow.
Very moving experience, and Donald Trump's response should have been to acknowledge the sacrifice. His response was the mother didn't speak. He was not mindful that Lawrence O'Donnell had the mother on the night before he made his crazy comments. But let Michael and Glenda, let me say something to you. As someone that served 10 years on the Intelligence Committee, first off, I know this. Donald Trump doesn't know a lot about what he is talking about, not only as it pertains to this matter. And to not say the words ISIS in the beginning of the convention, whether that's true or not, the last 2 days, there was an earful from General Allen, who I think knows more about war and circumstances than does Donald Trump. And let me be quick to add, ISIS is not the only terror organization in the world. And ISIS has been around in other forms as many as 10 years ago with Zarqawi, and Al-Qaeda hadn't gone anywhere. Al-Nusra hasn't gone anywhere. And if you want me to give you a whole list, ranging all the way from Indonesia and Bangladesh, all across the world. So saying ISIS doesn't mean anything if you don't know what you're talking about.
But here's really what the issue is. The facts bear out that ISIS is less of a threat domestically than domestic terrorism. That's what the facts bear out.
Sure.
But there is a perception of fear that this is a country on the edge. And to not acknowledge that perception may be costly.
You're correct. But Donald Trump also said yesterday that people are afraid to go to the movies. Then why are the movie theaters making more money than they've ever made? He also said that people are afraid to get on the airplanes. Why are the airlines making more money than they've ever made? Look, this guy is a con artist. And what he says is what comes up out of his mouth. The fellow that wrote the book for him, The Art of the Deal, Tony Schwartz, says he's a black hole that does not have a soul. You can't make it more poignant than that.
There was the article in the New Yorker in which he said that and described him as a sociopath. Yolanda, I have to say, I thought personally that Hillary Clinton's speech on Wednesday night, Thursday night, as the congressman says, sort of checked off all the boxes, but it wasn't inspiring. Of course, she was preceded by Michelle Obama, President Obama, Joe Biden. Cory Booker was, really got you excited. And I think, would you not concede that this email server thing is not going to go away? Donald Trump won't let it go away.
Well, the email server may not go away, but yes, it was inspiring. You could not be a woman in this country and not have been inspired by Hillary Clinton in her white pantsuit.
Is that the white knight?
That's the white knight. So no matter what the email server, it's not saying that it's not a very important issue, but women across every color line, every...
Did you feel empowered? To see her standing there accepting the nomination?
Absolutely. In my lifetime, I've been to, I think, 5 or 6 conventions. And I never would have imagined that we would have an African-American president and now a woman president. When you look at the young women, there were a number of young women in the audience, and you could see that now they really believe that they could be president. And it doesn't matter about the emails, at least at that moment. It was inspiring and energizing. And the issue is going to be, how do you take that energy and make sure that people turn out?
Mike,
this is going to be a turnout election.
Let me say about the email server. Firstly, the FBI has investigated it. Secretary Clinton has said that she made a mistake and that she would never do that again. But the simple fact of the matter is, the email server, so far as has been determined, that she had, the private one, was not hacked. The State Department server was hacked. The U.S. Congress server was hacked. The White House server was hacked. The CIA server was hacked. I could go on and on.
But they didn't have, Congressman, they didn't have private servers at their homes.
Yeah, but so did Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice have private servers.
And yet the situation in terms of security, the cyber world, had changed since
and it's going to change between now and the next election. What needs to be understood is we don't have a cyber treaty, and what has just happened to the Democratic National Committee is a constitutional question. It's not a policy question, and it's not a who had what question. If this matter is not addressed by international figures, then you haven't seen anything yet. We'll be talking way beyond this year's email server questions.
And Marco, you're involved in the DNC, the email issue with the DNC. Russia hacking into the DNC, embarrassing
allegedly hacking.
Allegedly, yeah, the FBI is looking into it, so it's out there. But that's what effect does that have? And certainly Debbie Wasserman Schultz has fallen on the sword, rightly or wrongly, we have yet to see. But what effect is that having on the party?
Well, first I have to say that it's shocking to think that something like that would ever happen. That in American politics, a foreign adversary would be involved in influencing American
And then
politics.
Donald Trump invited Russia to release these emails. inviting an adversary to get involved in a presidential
it's just unheard of.
election?
It's unheard of, and it's sad. It's a sad time in American politics that the other side would have their the highest office in this country would be involved in that kind of rhetoric.
Well, that might have been facetious, even though how horrible judgment it might have been. But I think anyone in that room, I'm not sure anyone took that very seriously on face value.
But the disturbing part is that when you are a presidential candidate,
of course.
Everything you say is taken seriously.
And is scrutinized and should
you
be.
You can't just be flippant as he tends to be.
Of course.
Well, I want to thank you all. You've been a great
Thank
guest
you so
this
much.
morning. Thank you for your thoughts. And Congressman, we wish you well.
See you soon.
We'll see you soon. All
Thank
right.
you.
Up next, we take the biggest news of the week to our Powerhouse Roundtable. Stay with us.
All right, for the roundtable this week, the Democratic Convention, Hillary Clinton's acceptance speech, and speeches by others. The First Lady, Joe Biden, so much to talk about here.
So much, and we also want to take a closer look at the Stand Your Ground win for a Broward sheriff's deputy who was charged with killing Jermaine Mcbean. And South Florida is now ground zero for Zika.
So let's introduce our panel today. Boy, what a group. H.T. Smith, Miami attorney, law professor at Florida International University School of Law, longtime civil rights leader in South Florida. Marilee Cancio, an attorney in Miami, activist in Republican Party politics, and was at the Republican National Convention, I believe, as an alternate delegate. Mark Caputo, familiar face here. We're glad to welcome him back, the Florida correspondent for Politico. He writes the indispensable Politico Florida playbook that we get in our email every weekday morning.
And also back from the conventions, both of them.
No, I actually didn't go to Philly. I thought there'd be no Florida drama, which is so stupid of me, right?
I'm so used to seeing you. You were there in my mind.
Marilee Cancio, you are a loyal and active Republican, and so just generally speaking, let's get your take on what happened in Philadelphia this week. What did you think? I mean, were there anything there that impressed you? The speech by the president, anything?
Well, really, all the drama on the first 2 days of Bernie supporters, and even on the last day during Hillary's speech, when they were chanting, and you know, her supporters were covering it with Hillary, Hillary in the middle of her speech about 18 times. I think that was pretty significant. I think the Democrats are also divided, and the fact that so many Bernie supporters walked out, there are allegations that there was a Craigslist ad paying $50 for people to go sit in those seats.
That was debunked. Yeah, we looked into that. That was debunked.
But there were a lot of empty seats in that convention after they left, and they were protesting every single day. So there's a lot of issues that...
so the Democrats' bottom line are not as unified as they wanted to appear?
Let's talk about, you know, I'm biased. I am, you know, I believe in the Republican...
Well, you have a point of view. We know
I do, but I believe in the numbers. And there were more people that watched the Trump final speech than Hillary's by millions. So I think that's a significant number. Even though we were led to believe that that was not the case, the numbers show that more people watched Donald Trump speech than Hillary's.
And what's the message there? What does it mean?
Well, first of all, more people watched the Democratic National Convention the first 3 nights than watched the Republican. A lot of people tuned in because they support Donald Trump. A lot of other people tuned in and say, what crazy thing is he going to say tonight? I'm not going to miss it. I was really happy. Unlike the other two here, I did not get a chance to go to either convention. I saw it as most Americans did. I was so happy they were back to back so people could see the contrast. Let me tell you what I saw. I saw a Republican convention that was telling people we're committed to building walls, a Democratic convention that we're going to build bridges, a Republican convention that says our army is disastrous and our nation in decline, a Democratic convention reminding us for the past 8 years we saved the economy from collapse. We created 15 million jobs when we were losing 800,000 a year.
Actually, 10 million. 10,
okay, let's say 10
million.
10.5 million. We were losing 800,000 a month when he came in, that we saved the auto industry, that we killed Osama bin Laden, who put a hole in the heart of every American. And lastly, the Dow Jones average is at 18,000. For those of us senior citizens, who are on a fixed income, that's a real nice way to go to our golden years.
To divide or to bridge the gap between the two of them, yeah, I agree. I think the Democrats did a better job getting their message out in the first 3 nights of their convention. But I do think that it's an indicator, not pure proof, that Donald Trump is still more interesting than Hillary Clinton, and a lot of people just don't want to watch Hillary Clinton. And it's kind of amazing considering that she's such now an historic figure. She is the first major party nominee, and I think it's about 3 million fewer people tuned in to watch her.
That's correct.
So that's the TV numbers, yet this country polls show in the voting numbers, they're still pretty much tied.
They're tied.
They're tied.
And I think people are beginning to realize that we have never had a Republican or Democratic nominee who's not flawed, because as human beings, we are all flawed. The question is that America has always picked the right person to lead at the right time. America is craving for leadership, craving for a leader, but not a supreme leader.
But America's not craving either of them is the problem with these two nominees. The Morning Consult, a polling firm, did a massive sample a few weeks ago, and it asked people to give their #1 descriptor of each candidate. And bottom line, America views this as the contest of the racist versus the liar. These are the horrible choices that we're going to have to make in October and November.
These are the two least liked, least respected nominees of either party, maybe in our lifetime, certainly in my lifetime. Let me ask you, Marilee. I thought that, as I said earlier, Hillary Clinton's speech was workmanlike. It checked off all the right boxes. But she really had to hit a home run on Thursday night. I personally don't think she hit a home run. What did you think?
I don't think she was believable. I mean, I really enjoyed her daughter's speech because it came from the heart and it came across as, you know, very sincere. And Hillary Clinton, to me, does not come across as sincere. And it's not only me. That's what the poll numbers show. And that's the reality. The negatives for both candidates are between 56 and 57%. So at the end of the day, right now, 4 years ago, there were only about 7 or 8% undecided voters. Right now, we were seeing about 20% undecided voters. So the question is going to be, that's why you can't predict who's going to win right now. I think they're pretty much tied, is who's going to vote for whom and who's going to stay home. Because when you talk about, we used to talk about 7 or 8% the undecideds are going to decide the election. Right now, we're talking about 20%
well, that number
of the
will
voters.
certainly go down.
Michael, I disagree with you. I don't think she had to hit a home run. I don't think it was a great speech, and I don't think she's a great orator. But I think the case was made for the future vision of the country by Michelle Obama, by Barack Obama, by Joe Biden, by Reverend Barber, who we keep forgetting about. I think her job was to try to do what Mario was not convinced of, and that is to try to show her humane side, to show that she can be trusted, to show her softer side. Some people, a small group, you know, they had some focus groups. Some people said, most people still find her untrustworthy. That's what her job is to do, not the great oratory, because if you want that from her or Trump, you're not going to get it. Trump is more interesting, no doubt about it. But she's not interesting, nor is she a great orator. She's got to show that people can trust her to run the country and get us out of this mess.
I don't know if she can get people to trust her. It seems pretty burned in that they don't. And recently, I believe it's today, on one of the other Sunday morning programs, she essentially said of the email scandal that's bedeviled her, basically it was found that I was always telling the truth. No, that's not true. And so this is a huge problem for Hillary Clinton that she faces. What I do see her doing on the X's and O's, the blocking and tackling of running a campaign, is making sure that people view Donald Trump as an equal liar to her. And I think that's what you're going to see and you've been seeing.
Yeah. Mark, if I can, I was at the Florida delegation meeting on Monday morning in Philadelphia. Debbie Wasserman Schultz came out, and oh my goodness, I mean, you had 400 or so people in the room, and about 200 of them, got up and started screaming at her, heckling her. These were Bernie Sanders supporters, and they would not stop. I mean, she tried to appear nonplussed and tried to say said a few things, but was really booed off the stage.
She got jeered off stage.
Yes,
right.
she was.
Yeah. Well, this is part of Debbie Wasserman Schultz's problem writ large, and it's not all her fault, but she does have a knack for making enemies in her own party. Right. It's also the problem of being a chair of any party, whether at a state, sometimes even local, and certainly at a national level. She's done it for 2 terms, which kind of wore out her welcome.
Right, 5.5 years.
A colleague of mine at Politico, Isaac DeVere, wrote a great story summarizing her problem, saying that she was asked to do 4 things of Joe Biden, and she wound up only doing 2 things, neither of which were on the 4 things list. One was to get tickets to go to an Obama speech. It was tickets to go to an Obama speech for donors. It was her family. And the other one was to have Joe Biden record a bat mitzvah video for her daughter.
And that wasn't even in the
right,
DNC emails that were leaked.
Out of the 4 things the DNC wanted her to do, she did 2, and neither of which were the 4 things.
I think it was Christmas in July for Canova.
Well, whether he can take advantage of it remains to be seen.
And I think what people did was understandable. The one thing the Democratic and the Republican National Committees must do is to remain neutral, and it's unequivocal.
Yeah, and they put their thumb on the scales.
And once you do that, you should be booed out of the room if you're in charge.
You know, we want to talk about Zika when we come back. Ground zero right here, right now, for the first cases of Zika in the country, locally acquired. And that is our next topic on the roundtable. Stay with us.
While no mosquito traps have tested positive for the Zika virus, the Department of Health is aggressively testing people in the affected area to ensure there are no other cases of this virus. We've not found any mosquitoes that we've tested through the traps that have the Zika virus.
That was Governor Rick Scott this week trying to apparently calm a jittery public now that 4 cases of locally acquired Zika were found in just north of downtown Miami, Wynwood, Midtown area. Mary Lee, what he's talking about is mosquito testing. There is the director of the Keys Mosquito Control had said last month, you know, the funding is not there to test. We're going to get a case in a person before we find it in mosquitoes. That has come to pass. What is going on with the funding? Is it too late now to get what we need federally?
I believe that Governor Scott sounded the bell on this back in February. Senator Rubio has been asking for funding. There's a lot of people from down here asking for funding. The fight has been how much? The state of Florida has invested, I think, $24 million in trying to treat this, but this is a much greater problem. I think folks in other parts of the country are not as concerned with the issue of Zika. They don't even know what it is, but it's going to cost our society a lot when babies start being born with microcephaly.
And when Senator Rubio asked for $1.9 billion, I thought that was a pittance with regard to the problem that we're facing. I was sitting reading my paper, I think it was yesterday, and reading about Miami Spice, which I always get excited about. And the first thing I did was went and crossed off all of the restaurants that happened to be in that
the design district,
in that design district.
Absolutely.
Wynwood is 18 blocks from my office. This will be devastating to the economies in that area, the business in that area.
To Florida in general, the tourism industry. I mean, in England, they already issued a warning for pregnant women not to come to Florida.
Well, one of the cable networks yesterday was doing live shots in front of Wynwood walls, which is, I mean, we ask this all the time, why is this so political? Why is this a political issue?
Everything's political, it seems. Ask Rubio that. He took President Obama's request, and then his own party said no to it. I think the real problem that we have in dealing with Zika is that there is still not a clear and convincing case in a lot of people's minds that it's that dangerous. And until that happens, you're not going to.
The New York Times has a front page article today that says that Zika is epidemic in Puerto Rico. We are seeing
in the Dominican Republic.
In the Dominican Republic, but I mean in Puerto Rico, part of the U.S. territory.
And that's the problem for Florida. We're the #1 place for people from Puerto Rico to emigrate to or immigrate to. And in addition, Senator Rubio's raised this point with the Olympics. There's going to be a lot of people coming through from the Olympics into Miami, and more of that's going to be spread.
And let's face it, Zika breaks out in Coral Gables, Aventura, Pinecrest, places like that. You know, in the area we're talking about, it's mostly Hispanics that live in that particular area. And let's not forget to talk about the fact that the political will is not there because of the people that are being affected.
I think the point Marley makes is a good one, is that Florida's congressional delegation, Republicans, Democrats, have really spoken with one voice and said, we want the money. Bill Nelson says, let's reconvene Congress and come back and fund Zika research and a vaccine, but there's no will to do that.
Congress sucks, let's face it.
All right, there's a point at which to take a break. All right, after the break, bonus roundtable round. We are going to take a look at the judge's decision in Broward County to dismiss charges against the BSO deputy who shot and killed a black man who was holding an air rifle. We want to turn now to a court ruling this week that granted stand your ground protection to a Broward Sheriff's deputy who had been charged with manslaughter in the shooting death of Jermaine Mcbean.
Deputy Peter Peraza fatally shot Mcbean, who was carrying an unloaded air rifle. First, though, some background from Local 10 News reporter Amy Viteri.
The ruling is that the case is dismissed.
A judge heavily weighed the mental state of Jermaine Mcbean at the time of his shooting death at the hands of BSO Deputy Peter Peraza. Mcbean, a 33-year-old IT worker, was not taking prescribed antipsychotic medications on July 31, 2013, when he carried an air rifle into the Green Tree Apartments in Oakland Park. Peraza shot Mcbean when he ignored commands to drop the weapon and allegedly pointed it at deputies.
What matters is perception. That air rifle looked very real.
Wednesday's order from the judge dismisses manslaughter charges against Peraza after a grand jury indicted him last December.
Mr. Mcbean never, ever pointed this air gun at any deputy or at anyone else. Never did.
Michael McCarthy was the lone eyewitness out of 5 who said Mcbean kept the rifle on his shoulders. In Wednesday's ruling, the court finds McCarthy's testimony to be the least credible of the eyewitnesses. His testimony directly contradicts the physical and forensic evidence, as well as the testimony of the other 4 eyewitnesses. Mcbean was involuntarily hospitalized after a psychotic episode at work 6 days before his death. The defense said his behavior, buying and showcasing the air rifle, was an attempt at suicide by cop. The court did not find evidence to support that, but wrote evidence showed Mcbean was in the midst of a psychotic episode at the time of the shooting. His last statement indicated he understood the perceived threat.
Wayne in his last breath said, "It's only a BB gun."
After his death, a photo of Mcbean wearing earbuds surfaced.
Did you ever notice any earbuds on him and his ears?
No.
Only one medic recalled the earbuds. The court found them irrelevant to the case. While the issue of earbuds might account for the victim's behavior, they do not change the perceived threat from the perspective of the defendant.
Amy Viteri reporting. Thank you, Amy. The appeal process could take several months, and in the meantime, BSO has not said if nor when Peraza's suspension could be lifted so that he could be returned to duty. So I guess we start with HT, the lawyers among us. What is the stand your ground standard for a law enforcement officer, and is that any different?
No, it's not any different for a law enforcement officer, and it is for a regular citizen. I said when they passed that law, it should be a Murderers Relief Act, because I think it gives too much leeway to take affirmative action as opposed to not to de-escalating the situation. But this was a very, very tough case. You've got a guy who 6 days before the incident had a psychotic episode. You got a finding from the judge that he was in the midst of a psychotic episode at the time of the shooting. You got a person with earbuds on carrying what looks to the average person like a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a air rifle, but there was no way for the officer to know that. This was a very difficult situation. The eyewitness who gave testimony on behalf of Mcbean's family was a long way away from the incident, and the police and the judge found that he was not credible. I think that the right decision was made regarding the charges. It's going to be very interesting, though, with a lower level of proof in the civil case as to whether or not Mcbean's family...
The preponderance of the evidence rather than beyond a reasonable doubt. So, Mary Lee, what about the appeal? The Broward State Attorney's Office is going to take this up to the appellate court, but given what HT just said, it doesn't sound like they have much of a chance.
I agree with the decision. I think he was charged politically because he was charged in December, 2 years after the shooting took place.
Yeah.
And he should have never been charged. Stand Your Ground law was enacted over a decade ago, and basically what it does is expand or remove the duty to retreat. We've had laws in our books since the 19th century of a right to defend yourself. What Stand Your Ground says is that you don't have to retreat to defend yourself. And I think that law is important for cases like this and other cases, that you don't have to go and hide in order to not be charged with a crime.
The Stand Your Ground, the Stand Your Ground law, I read Trayvon Martin, it was applied in Trayvon Martin with George Zimmerman, and I think you know, that kind of case is so different from this one, and it raised so many political questions.
No, it was not raised in the Trayvon Martin case. He did not seek that because he went through a trial and he was found not guilty at the end of the trial. Right. They raised it afterwards, but not. It was not found.
It's in the standard, but you know this. It's in the standard jury instructions, and one of the jurors did talk about it. I think one of the things we're not talking about, which we usually talk about after mass shootings, is mental health. Yeah. Here it's different. It wasn't someone who was having a psychotic episode who went shooting people. Yeah. It was someone who had a psychotic episode who carried a gun and was apparently acting erratically. Yeah. And this really kind of has spotlights. In our state, we have a terrible reputation, and deservedly so, for taking care of the least of these. And I would imagine in this case that happened, and there's a man dead now as a result.
Well, the state legislature, to give them some credit, I really do, but in this past session, they passed a package of mental health laws that really, finally, I think, make some real sense and make strides in treating people who are emotionally disturbed in the state of Florida.
We cannot in Florida talk about mental health without giving commendations to Judge Steve Lightman, who has led this effort throughout the state. We have made a step in the right direction with regard to legislature, which has been terrible in the past. Let's hope we continue on that line, and we think we can really improve the safety of our community. And as you say, look out for the least of these if we continue to do better with regard to mental health. We got to put money in it.
That's a good point in which to stop. Thank you all for coming in. Great roundtable. Really appreciate it. And after 2 weeks at the convention, Glenna and I are glad to get some help.
For sure. All right, when we come back, speaking of, notes from the road and a moment in history, 240 years in the making. Stay tuned.
Here is a live look now from our Hollywood beach cam. It looks hot and beautiful out there.
And here is a live look at Weather Authority meteorologist Jennifer Correa with the Sunday forecast. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Glenna. Hi, Michael. Welcome back. You guys did such a wonderful job. And welcome back to the heat. I will say this, that I believe you guys were under some heat wave up in the Northeast as well. Meanwhile, for us in South Florida, we're dealing with a few more clouds compared to what we had yesterday. Yesterday was absolutely spectacular. Well, with that cloud cover, temperatures right now actually only warming up to the upper 80s. We still haven't gotten into the 90-degree mark just yet. By the way, winds have been picking up. Earlier, wind speeds were around 15 miles per hour. Now it's lighted up a bit. There were a few showers out there, still pushing through southern portions of Miami-Dade County, but those are also dissipating. A couple more showers are headed your way across the lower Keys. Now, as we head into the upcoming week, we do expect a better chance for rain, and that's due to tropical wave. We're bringing up those rain chances Tuesday and Wednesday.
Jennifer, thanks. Some notes from the road this week, fresh back from the conventions. Both had some discord and dysfunction that derailed, at least temporarily, carefully staged and scripted spectacles. Among the standout moments, there is one that transcended party and politics, even for a moment. Tuesday evening, as the roll call of states finished, and the United States had its first woman nominated by a major party for president. That moment right there in the packed cheering arena, it was a bit surreal, and the reactions I especially wanted to observe and share were those of the women old enough to have experienced firsthand the time when being whatever you wanted to be was really not a realistic expectation. It is for my daughters now. They won't know any differently, hopefully. It seems strange that the U.S. of all places is so behind the times. Think Margaret Thatcher, Angela Merkel, Golda Meir, Benazir Bhutto, and others. Still, though, in our enlightened democracy, in too many instances, women are still judged differently than men by appearance, by demeanor, by preconceptions, even by well-meaning people whose instincts involved cultural biases they don't even realize they have. Backwards and in heels? That's a metaphor many women still know all too well. And that said, if we really have progressed, the history-defining moment marked Tuesday evening should not play at all into this presidential election. Voters should choose a leader for his or her intellect, actions, energy, record, and vision, not gender. So on to November, and may the best person for this country win.
Well said. I think you're right.
What do you think? We invite you to weigh in on any topic you like. Email Facebook, Twitter, any of these addresses. We are so easy to find.
And we will respond. Remember, stay informed, get involved. We'll see you next week.
Bye.